Chainmail. On Campaign, the solo wargaming guideway. This is by a fella named William Sylvester. Fantastic stuff for running a map-based wargaming campaign. This is the general guidelines we've been using to generate tabletop battles. Here is what our campaign map looks like. Let's make sure, no, that's not, let me get the other half here. We've got a lot of paper floating around. We got to kind of tidy things up. Here we go. Look how messy this is getting. We're going to zoom in on one particular section here. Specifically, we want to look at what's going on in the general campaign. The great Latora Khan is camped up here in the center of the Khanish lands with a fairly substantial army. He is separated from the Broman Empire down here in Brohome, and the Emperor has his own, not inconsequential army here in his capital. They're separated by the Darkbriar, and unfortunately for the Bromans, they have stirred up the elves who call the Darkbriar home. This is the buffer state that keeps things in an uneasy peace. The Bromans have sent two armies, well, three armies total. They sent one army to the east as a distraction and two armies to the west. They are trying to break into this feature right here, Watchtower Hill, to recover a priceless ancient artifact of great import. I refer, of course, to the massive gold belt that is called the Girdle of Vince McMaximus. So far, we've had two battles, one in the west, one in the east. Both of those battles have gone the way of the humans, but the humans are outnumbered, and now this battle of attrition is going to start to take its toll. I asked you guys, do you want to see the Battle of Second Elizabeth Farm or the Battle of Renninger Marsh first? By a vote of 5-2, you guys asked to see the Battle of Renninger Marsh first. So that's where we're going to start. That is located right up here on the very edge of the Falconholme Woods, and even though we are in these light woods that slow movement, you're not going to see a lot of woods today on the map. In fact, let's take a look at that map. Right. Well, you know, this is, one more thing I'll say. This map is getting a little bit confusing because we've had almost 2 full weeks of campaign. You can see this path right here is the path that the Army of the Center took to get through the Darkbriar. A lot of notes, a lot of reminders of what happened. We're going to put those aside, and what I've done is I've made photocopies of both maps, and I've just stripped out everything except the most relevant and pertinent information. We've got two armies clashing here on the 6th, we've got two armies clashing here on the 6th, and we've got two armies kind of staring at each other, which leaves the Army of the Center fairly close to Watchtower Hill. The question is, does Great Khan want to race down to cut them off? And he doesn't know. He wants to see how both of these battles go. We're doing near-instant communications across the map. I mean, it's a fantasy map, right? They'll ask the thrushes who knock on rocks what's going on, and the rushes will tell them. That's just what happens. So basically, we're going to wait and see what the Latora Khan is going to see how these two play out. If both of these are big wins for the Orcs, he may order these guys to sweep down and follow up so they can start wilding down here in the Broman Empire. For his part, the Emperor is doing the exact same thing. He's got an army, but he's waiting to see whether he needs to back these guys up, or if this army gets trashed, he's going to have to race over to protect Blagton. That's all strategic considerations. Today, all we need to understand is that the blocking force is opening a path for the Army of the Center to get up, and then, depending on how things go, the Army of the Center may need to fight their way back through this Orcish army. They're called the Reavers. But again, we need to find out what happens to both of these battles before we move on. So let's take a look at the terrain for the Battle of Renninger Marsh. And Renninger Marsh is named after one of my buddies, one of the guys that comments down in the comment section on a regular basis. This is a guy that knows a tremendous amount about Chainmail and AD&D. I really respect his opinion. When he talks, y'all should be listening. In our last video, we did kind of a rough sketch map of Renninger Marsh, and then I cleaned it up. And as you can see, one of the things I like to do as a solo wargamer, I put the armies down with general orders, and you can see here the Orcish commander. He's got a name. What is his name? Oh yeah, Warlord Grocknard. Again, named after one of my commenters. And for the Army of the West, that's General Martin Dart. So Grocknard he's got a total, if we look at these rosters here, the Orcs have a total of about 2,500 heavy foot to 2,000 heavy foot. Oh, Orcs are outnumbered. They've got 600 armored foot to 600. All right, so that's a bit of a wash. But now in the horses, you can see about 500 light horse to 300 heavy horse to only about 400 light horse for the Army of the West. So the Army of the West is outnumbered. They don't have any of these heavy hitters. These heavy horse are really powerful. And I don't know what a single stand of light foot is going to do. It's not even a single stand. It's a quarter of a stand. Each of our stands is 4 figures in the normal chainmail vernacular. And I've drawn each of the stands here. So every box is equal to 4 stands. And what I'm going to do today, rather than rounding up to the nearest or rounding and down and whatnot, we're going to go to the nearest 100. So this light foot, the Army of the West only has 100 light foot. This is just, I'm going to put 3 casualty markers on here. Likewise with this light horse, oh, they have 360. We're going to go ahead and give them all 4. But that's just one stand of light horse. And their orders are to kind of patrol and prowl this area. Keep these 2 heavy foot troop blocks together as you move up. Anchor on Renninger Marsh, and the armored foot will do much the same. For the orcs, they said, yeah, we're going heavy center. We're going to put our heavy foot out wide and try to sweep in from the side. And then we've got all of our horse over here ready to ride up the hill, maybe take a breather, and then come crashing down into the side. Light horse you don't want to spend in the battle, remember, because they play a vital role in the post-battle sequence, which we'll get to later. In the meantime, one of the questions a commenter had, in fact, I think it was Martin himself, do you do weather? And the answer is yes. I do 2 weeks worth of weather at a time. I know that in the first 2 weeks of July, we only have rain on the 5th and on the 7th. You need 2 days of rain in a row to really have an effect on the strategic map. But I don't see any reason why all that rain wouldn't accumulate down here in the lowlands in Renninger Marsh itself. It had been fairly dry, so Renninger Marsh had shrunk, and now I'm going to roll a d8, and we're going to go from the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Imagine like a tic-tac-toe board with the 9 in the center where the marsh is. I'm going to put a second marsh down, showing how the marsh has expanded due to those rains. And with a result of a 4, that second one is going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. Right about here. So Renninger Marsh, when it gets really wet, extends down to the southeast. Let's take a look at what this map looks like when you translate it to the battlefield or the tabletop, if you will. Before we do that big reveal, let me show you a mistake that I made. Remember that you've got 2 different ratios you need to remember for this game. One of which is that we are using a ratio of each figure represents 25 orcs or humans. But each stand represents 4 figures. So each of these stands should represent 100 guys. That means these armored foot for the orcs, there should be 6 stands there. And that 6 stands, that represents 24 figures. Likewise, the armored foot for the Army of the West. Problem is things get really ugly for the Army of the West because that means they've got a total of 3 stands of heavy horse and 5 light horse. But bear in mind, those light horse, see 480, divide that by 25, and what you get is 19 figures, not the full 20. So what I did is I marked them up here with a casualty marker. That just shows you that there's 1 less figure in that group. Likewise for the orcish armored foot here, and for, heavy foot, and for the human heavy foot down here. This stand represents a grand total of, well, there should be 2,040. I should put 3 markers down here. They only get 1 extra guy. So one of these stands only has 1 guy in it. Oh, there's 2 there now, and there's your 3rd. Now, when I do this battle, I'm not, for this video report, I'm not going to walk you through every individual moving of each piece. You've seen the general battle plan. I'm going to play the first couple of turns of movement, and then we'll come back and we'll take a look at how things have changed. Better yet, let's just go ahead and do the bulk of this battle in quick time. You guys understand the rules of chainmail. We've got a lot of videos out showing the nuts and bolts, soup to nuts kind of situation. So instead, let's just look at the ebb and flow of the battle, talk about what I did right, what I did wrong, and talk about how playing miniature war games should give you a real sympathy for generals like McClellan. You know, this is a very complicated endeavor that we're engaging in, and you can remind yourself over and over and over that numbers matter, that overwhelming superiority applied at the right place is make or break. And you can understand that is true even within a game like Chainmail. And then when the rubber hits the road, you play it a little bit too conservatively. Now, I am going to, of course, refer to General Grocknard for the Orcs, and I should say Warlord Grocknard and General Dart for the humans. But, of course, I'm the only player. So when I accuse either of those generals of making a mistake, that mistake is my own. Full disclosure. The big mistake on the part of the Orcs here, and spoiler alert, the Orcs do win this battle. The real question is, how badly do they win, and ultimately, does this become essentially a Pyrrhic victory for the Orcs? And you will see that it kind of does. It's hard to say until we look at the ramifications on the strategic map. So just looking at the tactical map, the fatigue rules here, you only get to move 4 times, and then when you charge into combat, you get 1 round at full strength, and now you are stepping down a class for the rest of the game, means that the defense has an inherent built-in advantage. The Bromans hunker down there behind Renninger Marsh, that's the brown you see in the lower left, and they refuse to come out and play, which forces the Orcs to run on down. And the Orcs have now spent a lot of fatigue just getting into combat. So that's one issue, that the Orcs needed to be more patient. And as you watch the ebb and flow of this battle, you'll see a couple of placards pop up showing you some interesting things. The big thing I want you to watch is that last troop, the big block of 12, or is it 13? I think it's 1,200 Orcs in the upper right now. Instead of bringing overwhelming numbers to bear right out of the gate, the Orcs leave those guys behind the light woods as a mobile reserve to protect any retreats. That is a huge mistake, because they are a full 3 or 4 moves away from the action. Anybody that retreats or routes is not going to retreat that far away. They're not helping them out. And when they do finally decide to commit, whether to go to the left or the right around those trees, it's too late. They are 4 turns away. They're going to need to take a turn to rest if they don't want to be completely blown out and exhausted by the time they get to... They were just walking through some of the morale there. If you want that troop to be fresh, it's going to take 5 or even 6 turns. That's a long time to go. So those are 2 situations where we really kind of butt up against the limitation of Chainmail. And that limitation is that Chainmail doesn't have any inherent victory conditions. You have to think about and design that from the get-go. What we need to do when we're running a campaign like this is specify how much time is left in the day. We really need a hard and fast turn limit, particularly when you're throwing massive blocks of troops around. Now, we've been a little bit lax in doubling the morale scores when you've got small troops, and this time around, thanks to a couple of my viewers calling me out, hey, you're not playing the rules as they're written, we went with that. And what happens is you'll see a lot of these big blocks get stuck in, and they will just stand there grinding against each other all day long. And the game does tend to bog down in kind of the mid to late stages until one of those masses breaks. And as a result, you wind up with 3 or 4 one-on-one combats, and we've all played D&D where it boils down to just rolling D20 damage, D20 miss, D20 miss, D20 damage. This game bogs down to that as well. However, it does that principally because of the lack of victory conditions. Now, that battle over there on the left flank, as the Bromans look at it, I messed that up the first time through. I miscounted the number of troops. Remember that each of these stands represents 4 figures, and for some reason, I got it wrong, and I had to kind of retcon and go back, because the armored foot for the Bromans are going to lose that battle, except we missed. And they were measuring some charges. No, they're not too far away. So the battle there in the middle is the heavy horse. What you can see is the heavy horse charged into the troops. And, oh, look, the troops are now disordered. Problem is, those heavy horse are, yes, they successfully charged. There wasn't even a melee. The heavy foot ran away. But now those heavy horse are exposed, and the light horse pivot to face them. And look at that. See that one stand of light infantry up there? Those guys are the heroes of the day. Those are the guys that are going to defend that flank of the light horse as they charge into the heavy horse. And here we see the melee. We got some wounds going down, wounds on the guys up north. over there on the left flank. In the center now, we're looking at how the light horse for the orcs, those are wolves, and we're just going to call them wolves from here on out. Those wolves are set to charge directly into the flank of the light horse for the Bromans, except there's one stand of light infantry. And that one stand is going to play a very pivotal role in this battle. Hey, look, we got another charge. The Broman foot succeed. They failed to stand. Oh, there, see, there's the charge. Everything gets a little complicated. One stand of light infantry blocks the light horse or the wolves from being able to complete their charge. And even if they die this turn, they have fulfilled a very important role, because bringing those light horse in against the orcish chariots or heavy horse means you now suddenly do have a situation where you have an overwhelming superiority of numbers. I don't know what went on here with this really weird slow fade. You'll have to forgive me for that. But you can see over on the left now, look at that, we got prisoners. Yeah, we got prisoners. That's the block of troops on the far left. They are being escorted to the north, and now the Broman right flank, or left flank, excuse me, the big block of troops gets stuck in, and you've got one of those melees over there on the left. The question is going to be, how do you save the armored Broman foot that are being escorted up the left-hand side of the board? And a combat goes through. Guys are getting tired. The yellow chips. Oh, I started throwing blue chips down. Those represent 3 yellow chips, just so there's a little bit less ground clutter. A little bit of pushback here. All right, you know, that fight's going to continue. Rolling 10 dice, hitting on 6s means you're going to get 1 or 2 casualties each turn. It's going to take 2 turns of fighting to remove a stand. And these big blocks are just going to stand for a while. Oh, look in the center, the orcish chariots, because they were so heavily outnumbered, and because there's less than 20 of them, they are now captured. And you can see they are very close to the end of the board. Now, in the center of the battlefield, something interesting happened. Those light horse did manage to get charged. The wolves drove off the Broman light infantry, which allowed them to charge into the rear of the Broman light horse, which forced the Broman light horse to run away, and conveniently enough for them, they wind up running towards the prisoners that are being escorted off the battlefield. The orcs on the left side of the battlefield they're committed. So they have to run that battle. And here we see those light horse are racing up. And because the orcs over there couldn't afford to dedicate too many troops to guard duty, because they thought everything was locked up on the other side of the battlefield, they're in trouble. They're still 2 moves away from the northern boundary of the battlefield. And the Broman light horse are going to be able to pursue and rescue them coming up here in another turn or 2. And that's what I mean about sweeping battles. A lot of back and forth. A little bit of pushback opens up some paths. You see this in games like Dragon Rampant. I don't see people talk about it a whole lot. But sometimes that pushback, and you know what? I'm not going to pursue. We're going to take a breather. There you go. There's a little bit of a rescue. Look at that. The light horse in the upper left-hand corner of your screen are going to have to spend a turn fighting. And then you'll see things kind of slow down up there as the prisoners are refreshed. Everybody gets kind of repositioned, and they take the full turn rest. They maneuver to get, and now the armored foot are streaming back down south to try and, the Broman armored foot are streaming back down south to see if they can salvage something on the left wing. In the center, after a long, slow march, the orcish armored foot have finally impacted their rivals in the center, that big block of heavy foot for the Bromans. And this fight is, again, numbers tell. After several turns, we finally brought the block of orcish troops on the right-hand side have come in, and now they are dueling with Bromans as well. Oh, no. Again, our hero foot, our light foot is eliminated. Boop, there it goes. And they protected the flank of the center wing of the army, center wing, if you will. Those heavy foot for the orcs on the far right side of the battlefield had to deal with those light infantry. Moving towards them, fighting a round of battle. Now those guys have got 4 fatigue markers, and up the action you're looking at on the upper left is the light horse. The wolves for the orcs have successfully pursued the light horse for the Bromans off the field. Fortunately enough for the armored foot. In the center, the Bromans are having a lot of success against the armored foot, but that's not going to last for very long, because with the Broman Lightfoot dead, the big block, the reserve, if you will, of orcs on the right-hand side are going to be able to sweep in and crush the center of the Broman army. Before they can do so, the Broman army is going to drive back the armored foot, and at this point it's just a quick case of try to score as many wounds as you can on your way out the door. That is what the Bromans are looking to do, because it will make this surviving Orcish force small enough that the center wing is going to be able to deal with them on their return from securing the girdle of Maximus. And that's where this really starts to shine, is you have to start thinking about the strategic situation. Over on the left, the Bromans are taking the brunt of damage. They're really getting pounded, and the armored foot are not going to be able to survive in time. But eventually, the armored foot for the orcs give way and surrender. They just got crushed. And now you get a little bit of an odd sweeping situation where an alley is open to be able to escort those prisoners off the board as well. And that's what you can see going right now. Because enough of the Bromans have survived, let's deal with that later, and we'll slide right back into the real-time narrative. And we'll wrap this up, put a little bow on it. It's getting late in the day. Everybody is getting exhausted. I want to show you what happens here when we roll our 10v10. Because this is pretty typical of what we've been seeing. Rolling 10 dice for the Bromans, we get 2 more casualties, which will eliminate this stand. Then we roll 10 dice for the orcs, and they're going to get, typically, so they got 4 this time, we'll eliminate a whole stand. With that bonus of 2 casualties, they'll get a bonus of 8. They have an extra 4, 5, that's 13. Then the bonus of 5 guys gives them another 25, that's 40. They're pushing these guys back. All right? Over here, this result is going to be very similar, but whatever happens, I mean, we can roll the 10 dice for these guys, hitting on 6s. They're going to do 1 more casualty, and then the counterattack is only going to be 8 dice. Looking for 6s, we do 3 casualties. That will remove these 2, plus 2, plus 1 more. This is pretty typical of what you see, but if you notice, we are now going to have these 5, these kind of cancel out. We've got a bonus of over 100 already. These survivors are going to be captured as prisoners. And essentially what we're looking at here is, over the course of the next 2 turns, these heavy foot are going to ride up as these guys slide around behind. And even after breaking free with these 4, 5 stands plus an extra guy for prisoners, they'll have to bring off these 3 and then call it 1 more stand. We've got a total of 40 figures that are not going to be able to get around in time to save these prisoners. I'm just going to GM fiat this. You can tell we've been going at it for a while. These guys will likely be pushed back a little bit at a time. These heavy foot. So what we'll do to just make a ruling is we're going to eliminate 2 more stands from each of these guys. Well, the orcs are doing better. Let's remove 2 stands here and 3 guys here. So at the end of the battle, I think this is a pretty reasonable assumption. One difficulty that I have with this game is that there are no real hard and fast victory conditions. You just kind of keep playing and playing and playing until you get tired of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rule that we've got 3 stands of heavy foot that you can't see now. Let me bring this over so you can. Grind. These guys are going to be prisoners. And we're going to call, so by the time these guys get over here, I think we'll call this a retreat in good order. And I think we'll call these orcs survivors and these guys. So basically for the humans, they're going to be able to get off the board with 6 full stands, 7, 8 full stands of heavy foot. They have captured 3 stands of heavy horse and 3 stands of armored foot and done a lot of damage. The orcs will wind up surviving, but they've lost 5, no, that's 6, almost 7 stands of prisoners themselves. If this was a civilized encounter between civilized people, we may wind up doing a prisoner exchange in the in the next few days. But these surviving orcs now have a problem because they are trapped between the remnants of this army and the other human army. I kind of think this was tactically a win for the orcs, but because this operates in the context of a campaign, I think they are losing the strategic battle of attrition. We'll have to run some numbers, and we'll do that off screen, figure out what the results and ramifications of this fight were, and we'll do that in another video, which we'll do in a week. Till then, I'm praying for you.